Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you all to this online discussion organized by the Hellenic Foundation for European and Foreign Policy, ELIAMEP, within the framework of its project Winds of Change. And the question of today's event is, can renewable energy shape a new geo-economic paradigm for the European Union, Greece, and its neighborhood? And we have with us distinguished speakers. I will begin with Mr. Giorgos Amyras, Deputy Minister for Environmental Protection Issues at the Ministry, of course, of Environment and Energy. His Excellency, Mr. Frode Overland Andersen, the Ambassador of Norway to both Greece and Cyprus. Ms. Aleksandra Tomczak, member of the Cabinet of the Executive Vice President Frans Timmermans, in charge of the European Commission's European Green Deal. Professor Ioannis Grigoriadis, Senior Research Fellow, Head of ELIAMEP's Turkey Program, and member of the project of Winds of Change, and Constantine Levoyannis, researcher for the project Winds of Change here at ELIAMEP, Head of EU Affairs at NEL Hydrogen. We will begin with some short, I hope, introductory remarks from our speakers that will give us the framework, if you like, of our discussion that will follow. So firstly, I would like to welcome Deputy Minister Amyras. Mr. Amyras, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, Honorable Ambassador, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to sincerely thank you for the invitation to participate in this discussion launched by ELIAMEP. It is for fact that the devastating forest fires my country, Greece, has experienced in August prove in practice that the Mediterranean is indeed a hotspot for climate crisis and one of the most vulnerable regions to climate change impacts globally. To deal with climate crisis is quite hard and demanding, but it's also an obligation. If we don't fix this, our children and grandchildren will be fighting wars over water and food, as Vice President Timmermans noted. All this signal the urgency and determination with which we need to intensify our efforts and cooperation based on EU Green Deal to become the first climate-neutral continent by 2050, resulting in a cleaner environment, more affordable energy, smarter transport, new jobs, and an overall better quality of life. To this end, we have already adopted bold economy-wide policies and measures covering all related sectors that can lead to significant greenhouse gas emissions reduction. Specifically, considering the Mediterranean, that is our common home for thousands of years, our road of trade and cultural exchanges is indeed characterized by diversity, significant habitats, and a hotspot for endemism. Paving the path of environmental diplomacy, Greece took an initiative to hold on September 17th in Athens the first EU-Med9 summit that included a special session on the environment and climate change in the Mediterranean. Through the Athens Declaration that was adopted during the summit, participating countries stressed, among others, the need for urgent action to address the long-term challenges on the region's biodiversity and ecosystems, and took on concrete commitments regarding this issue. Let me also reiterate the bold and proactive commitments announced by our Prime Minister, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, during the IUCN World Congress in Marseille last month. We are committed to halving marine plastic litter and reducing the disposal of microplastics by 30% by 2030. We also know that overfishing significantly impacts biodiversity. We commit strongly to reducing overfishing by 2030, declaring that 10% of our seas will be no-take reserves, meaning that fishing will not be permitted there. As per the marine pollution, especially from plastics, under the coordination of our ministry, Greece has completed the elaboration of a new national circular economy action plan that is based on the new EU plan. It focuses on production, consumption, waste management, as well as on horizontal issues related to governance and administration. Well, Greece is also bound to revise its national biodiversity strategy and action plan in 2022 that is expected to last until 2030. that interacts with other running national strategies dealing with biodiversity, such as the National Strategy on Climate Change Adaptation, the National Forest Strategy, as well as the recently adopted National Reforestation Plan, funded by the RRF with 200 million euros, which aims to the implementation of reforestation projects on 17,000 hectares between 2021 to 2025, and the establishment of a mechanism for the protection, conservation, and monitoring of reforestation by 2030. Urgently addressing plastic pollution is one of the key priorities of our action plan. Greece has incorporated in its national legislation the EU Single-Use Plastic Directive in October 2020, much earlier than the date of entry into force of the directive in July 2021. We are also in the process of formulating our own national climate law. With regard to another very important policy area for us, the one of circular economy, Greece has completed the elaboration of a new national circular economy action plan last spring. In closing, I'd like to underline the role of these forums for dialogue as key sectors to enhance the governance of sustainability development through a multi-stakeholder approach. Thank you for your attention.
We thank you, Deputy Minister, and also for being short in your introductory remark. Now I'm moving on to His Excellency, Mr. Frode Overland Andersen, the Ambassador of Norway to both Greece and Cyprus. Mr. Ambassador, the floor is yours. Good evening.
Thank you so much. I'll also try to be short, and thank you to ELIAMEP for inviting me for this very, very important topic. As you might guess, energy is something which is, of course, very close to my heart as a Norwegian. I think the Winds of Change projects points to both the direction we're heading and also some of the dilemmas we're facing in front of us when it comes to utilizing the potential of energy in not only in Greece but also in the wider EastMed region. I think it's important to remember that the possibilities offered in the energies field is a platform. It's a platform that can be used for cooperation if we choose to. But a platform is if you want to follow the analogy, a platform is like where you're waiting for a train. You could choose to board the train or you could choose not to. And I'm very, very glad that Greece has chosen to board the train of energy and energy cooperation, because this is the train for the future. This is actually the direction we're heading as Europe together, and this is something that depends on that we manages to leave the old thinking of each country is their own energy system and think regional energy system. This is something we have been working on in Scandinavia for quite some time, and the success of the Scandinavian countries when it comes to electrification and clean energy is largely dependent on our regional cooperation. And I think this offers some lessons for EastMed, which I think is interesting to touch upon. I'll try to make this in 5 very short points, and this will be very telegram style, so forgive me if I miss some of the finer points regarding the region. But as I said, Greece has taken the chance to board the train of cooperation, regional cooperation, and is quickly developing into a regional energy hub. I just received my vice president of the parliament for a conference in Athens, and I briefed him in the car going into Athens this afternoon. And he was quite astonished to hear about the bold move taken by Greece over the last 4 or 5 years when it comes to developing the energy sector. And Greece is indeed off to a good start. Now we're entering a new period, and I think what happened in Athens just yesterday with the trilateral agreement with Egypt to build new interconnectors across the Mediterranean is very pertinent in signaling exactly what we're talking about in the Winds for Change project, the regionalization of the energy markets in the East Mediterranean. that opens a host of new doors, but also some dilemmas. I will leave the dilemmas for the researchers and talk a bit about some of the possibilities. Of course, my first point is of course just in line with what Deputy Minister Amyras just pointed to, the continued building of renewable energy in Greece. And Greece is off to a very, very good start and has ambitious targets in the renewable sector. And this is something we follow with great interest. And the bigger the energy mix in your country gets, the more you need the regionalization. I'll revert to this point. But my second point is, when you're building all these renewables, you need also to look into the ocean space. And as the minister just mentioned, Greece has ambitious targets for their ocean space in terms of environment and ecology. But I also think we need to look to the ocean space for energy. And the obvious choice is then, of course, to go into offshore wind. Greece has a huge potential, but this potential needs to be harnessed in an organized and orderly fashion. And my second point is that we really, really need to get the regulation and opening the market for offshore energy, offshore wind energy outside Greece. I know this is just around the corner. The government is working hard on these new regulations, and I'm really looking forward to seeing them. I think a joint European energy market is really now focusing on Greece and their new regulation and see what they will bring to the table. My third point is that doing all of this, we cannot ignore the possibility when we look into the ocean space of also existing hydrocarbon resources. We need to have two thoughts in the head at the same time. We cannot ignore the need for a country to have a baseload in their energy mix, meaning the days the sun is not shining and the wind is not blowing, we still need energy. And for Greece, gas will be that energy for the foreseeable future, at least in the temporary stage. My fourth point is basically coming back to what I just mentioned. The more renewable energy you get into your energy mix, the more dependent you are on regionalization of your energy. Meaning, if you produce too much, you need to be able to export it. If you produce too little, you need to be able to import energy. In the Scandinavian countries, we have over 10,000 megawatts of interconnectors connecting our countries, basically making sure that whenever Norway is overproducing, we can sell it to Denmark, Sweden, UK, Germany, etc. And whenever we are producing too little, we can import it at no great cost to ourselves. And this is exactly the way we need to think about energy in the EastMed. And it's also very, very deeply connected to attracting investors into the energy market in the EastMed. You need to be able to show that the market is interconnected in the wider region. Moving on to the fifth point and the final point. To make all of this work, the regionalization, the building of more renewable energy, we need a market, a regional market. As a national market won't do. We need, of course, the more regional our outlook is, the more regional our market needs to be. So we need a functioning, professional, market-oriented, market-based energy market for the EastMed. The sooner, the better. This will, of course, start with just a few countries, but more countries should be added on. And the development which is taking place in Athens with the Athens Stock Exchange spin-off, this NX, the Athens Energy Exchange, I think is an embryo which we should attach a lot of interest to actually become such a market. Because when we produce energy regionally, we need to be able to trade it regionally so that it can be traded in real time between real clients, between the countries. I will leave myself there as a sort of prelude to the debate following, but these are the 5 points I think we should really pay attention to. And then I bet the researchers will also come up with the dilemmas. The good thing about being ambassadors is that you can avoid some of the dilemmas and talk about the nice stuff. But thank you so much for the time being, and I'll be here for the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Now, moving to Ms. Aleksandra Tomczak, who is member of Cabinet of the Executive Vice President Frans Timmermans, in charge of the European Commission's Green Deal. Good evening from Athens, Ms. Tomczak. Thank you so much. The floor is yours.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me to join this debate. It's the second time I'm participating in an ELIAMEP event, and glad to be here with you. I wanted to start with a little bit of a big picture on the European Green Deal and where we are and what does that mean for the Mediterranean region and the role of Greece. So let me maybe start by saying that when we announced the climate neutrality target 2 years ago, that was, well, more or less, we started 2 years ago with the European Green Deal. We said we wanted to be a climate neutral continent by 2050. That was an extremely ambitious and quite extravagant target. Today we are joined by many other regions in the world. South Africa would like to reach climate neutrality by 2050. South Korea, the US rejoined the Paris Agreement. China committed to carbon neutrality by 2060. Japan as well by 2050. So this group is becoming, is clearly becoming bigger, and what seemed like a very distant and ambitious target is now being shared by a growing number of countries. We're not there yet. Ahead of COP26, we need many more to come up with ambitious commitments. But we are, I think, in a better situation than we thought we would have been when the pandemic started, and there were many calls to even scrap this ambitious policy. But in the end, in December last year, the leaders took a decision to make the European Green Deal a way out of the economic crisis. This is also what we now hear facing the energy crisis problem, even though there are numerous calls for delaying Fit for 55 package and more ambitious policies. There are actually even more voices to saying that what we see today and the situation on the fossil fuels market essentially proves that we need to accelerate the transition away from fossil fuels and towards clean energy sources. We are also now the first region in the world to have proposed a blueprint for reaching our ambitious targets. We proposed Fit for 55, so a plan on reaching minus 55 emissions reductions by 2030 across all sectors of the economy. So tackling also the more difficult ones, such as transport, industry, and buildings. We know we can do a lot in the energy sector. We're not there yet, but we know more or less what we need to do. But what is more challenging is, of course, the sectors where the emissions have increased recently, like transport, for example, or those sectors where they have remained stable, like industry. So coming back to the question of what does it mean for the Mediterranean and for our partners, the European Green Deal has very much an external dimension. We want to make the European Green Deal the basis for our engagement with partners externally, and our immediate neighborhood is, of course, a priority. This year, we actually managed to accelerate this process quite substantially. We had 2 meetings under the Union for the Mediterranean, one of the energy ministers and one of climate and environment ministers in June this year and in October this year in Cairo and in Portugal. This was the second time these ministerial meetings were held since over the past 6 years. We managed to reach quite, I would say, ambitious agreement on what should be done in the future to foster this more regional approach to developing clean energy sources, fostering clean energy investments, more regional approach to climate and environment policy. So this is clearly a very good news. We also managed to put green recovery at the heart of this process, and it will be very important to now look concretely how we can implement all these commitments. looking also in the direction of COP27, which will take place in Egypt. In the Mediterranean region, and it will be very interesting also as part of this discussion to hear how to use this opportunity of having the next COP after Glasgow in the Mediterranean region, and how to and how to foster this and promote this agenda of regional integration based on a clean energy transition during that period. So I maybe leave it at this for the introductory remarks, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Ms. Tomczak. Now moving on to Professor Ioannis Grigoriadis.
Excuse me for the interruption. Because you proceed to Mr. Grigoriadis, I would kindly ask to be excused because I get to participate in an intergovernmental meeting in a few minutes. Am I excused?
Of course, you are excused. Of course, you're excused, Mr. Deputy Minister.
Thank you very much.
Even though we would like to hear more about the goals of the Greek government, the initiatives and the actions, and the participation in trilateral schemes in the Mediterranean region, but of course, you are excused. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I wish you the best.
Now, we're moving on to Professor Ioannis Grigoriadis, who's Senior Research Fellow and Head of ELIAMEP's Turkey program. And of course, part of, before I will give you the floor, Professor Grigoriadis, I would like you to tell us more about the project Winds of Change, the partners of the project, and perhaps, and of course, the collaborators, and the aims and goals of this project ELIAMEP. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Voudouri, for the opportunity you give me to share my views and also introduce the project to our audience. This project has been kindly supported by the EEA grants in order to promote a new vision for the Mediterranean. We have been listening about news in the Mediterranean. It's about conflict, it's about lack of connectivity, lack of economic cooperation. The Mediterranean, although it used to be a region where cultures and civilizations and trade thrived, today is one of the least connected regions in the world. So there is a very interesting observation there. And this project tries to look into a cooperation opportunity in the region. And this cooperation opportunity is the development of renewable energy, infrastructure, and connectivity, together, of course, with a European deal that facilitates this transition. The traditional, conventional discussion about energy cooperation in the Eastern Mediterranean referred to hydrocarbons. And of course, we know why, because about 10 years ago, there were some discoveries of natural gas resources in the exclusive economic zone of Cyprus, of Israel, and Egypt that raised the prospect of hydrocarbons becoming a catalyst for cooperation in the region. So how this hope survived for some years, unfortunately, the all-encompassing political disputes and diplomatic conflicts in the region ended up kind of covering the opportunity, sort of like strangling the opportunity that could that the development of hydrocarbon resources in the region could be. So instead of the discovery of hydrocarbon resources helping the resolution of the Cyprus problem kind of affected the development of hydrocarbon resources because Turkey came back with its expansionist, unilateralist views on the issue of exclusive economic zone, and Turkish Cypriots, for example, were not represented in decisions made by the Republic of Cyprus. So we got back to the old discourse, which has not been constructed, unfortunately. Meanwhile, the market has changed. This is important to highlight that apart from the political risk that all these disputes in the region bring about, and of course it's not just Turkey and the Cyprus issue, there are the Turkey-Israel relations, Turkey-Egypt relations, the Syrian civil war, the Libyan civil war. Unfortunately, the EastMed is ridden with all sorts of conflicts at the moment. So in addition to that, the development of hydrocarbons, the investment on offshore hydrocarbon resources became extremely expensive. And the market case for the development of this resource became weaker and weaker. The pandemic dealt a heavy blow against this, in addition to the trends that we were describing before, because, and what I'm referring to is that the gas that would be produced would be expensive for the global gas market. So it will be difficult to find buyers at these prices. In addition to that, the pandemic posed an additional challenge. And of course, now that the European Union has decided for very important and reasonable grounds to shift to a new era whereby hydrocarbons are eventually abandoned in the European energy mix, this means that the hydrocarbon case in the Eastern Mediterranean becomes virtually impossible, if not very difficult. But there is a new case and a new opportunity for the region. And this is what this project and our paper, the paper we co-authored with Constantine Levoyannis, is trying to bring forward. That while the hydrocarbons case is now weak, there is a very strong case for the development of renewable energy in the Eastern Mediterranean. And this renewable energy infrastructure may refer to connectivity, developing cable connectors, or developing common projects. Because as the ambassador very well highlighted, the development of these infrastructures requires connectivity for practical reasons. It's not just the politics of this and the hope that connecting the countries and the neighbors will improve bilateral relations and will provide an opportunity for conflict resolution. This is the logic of the market and the business in that respect. So in our project, we try to highlight how developing renewable energy infrastructure, and we talk about onshore and offshore wind power plants, and we talk about hydrogen projects. And Mr. Levoyannis was going to explore this even further after me, because he's the expert on that. These developments are providing a new framework for regional cooperation. This is not to say that the bilateral problems are absent. They're still with us. Unfortunately, the last 2 years have not been good in Greek-Turkish relations on the Cyprus question. We have to consider that. But on the other hand, we need to think positively and with an outlook towards the future. And the future is renewable energy. And it is a great opportunity for the Eastern Mediterranean countries to address their energy needs according to the new demands, according to the new age, as well as find ways to improve their bilateral trade, promote their economic cooperation, and hopefully create a new framework whereby the resolution of the bilateral disputes is going to be easier than today. So I would like to stress this optimistic line in the end of this, my short presentation, because I do think that this discussion, the Winds of Change discussion, that is like bringing the renewable energy factor into the Eastern Mediterranean economy and politics, is a very optimistic sign for the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. And moving on to Constantine Levoyannis, who is researcher of this project, The Winds of Change at ELIAMEP, and head of EU Affairs, Nel Hydrogen. The floor is yours, Mr. Levoyannis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be here today with such distinguished guests. The great thing about being last on the panel is that the context has been set by everyone, and it's been done remarkably well, from the forest fires to the potential of Greece and the region in terms of energy, the Green Deal, the EU objectives, geopolitics, connectivity. Those are some of the key words that we've heard up until now. So how can I add value? What I'm going to try and do is look at Greece as a starting point and think about the energy security strategy and the policies of the last 5-10 years. So you look at Greece and the surrounding region, and this is really the doorway to Europe, from the southeast for Asia, for North Africa. And Greece has been the focal point of the European Union and the US transatlantic partners for the development of the Southern Gas Corridor. That was the top priority the last 5 to 10 years. It's an important energy corridor to help diversify energy sources of Greece and of Europe. Now this endeavor, the Southern Gas Corridor, is completed. Azeri gas is flowing. TAP is delivering, the Trans-Adriatic pipeline is delivering natural gas to consumers. So the TAP project put Greece on the map essentially as an important transit country. But Greece, and here's one of the dilemmas that the ambassador alluded to, Greece is still prone, and Europe by extension is still prone to potential for supply disruptions. And more so now than ever before, with the relations with Turkey seeming to be in a constant state of deterioration, for lack of a better word. Now, how can we change that? So we have the Green Deal, and Greece, with renewable energy, with clean hydrogen development, can go from being a transit country to becoming a producing country for renewable energy and hydrogen that it can produce locally and consume locally, but also it can become a mass exporter and a transit hub for renewable energy from the region and from North Africa. We have plenty of sun, we have plenty of potential for wind, and North Africa even more so. So, I mean, the ambassador already referred to the cooperation with Egypt and other actors in the region. So the regional cooperation framework is really, it's been coming together and it's been building the last 5-10 years that we've had this discourse narrative around EastMed hydrocarbons. What have we been lacking? And this has been referred to already as well, is we're a region that is severely lacking in modern energy infrastructure. And we have an opportunity now with the Green Deal to develop a Green Deal compliant energy infrastructure to harness and transport energy from points of production to points of consumption. This is really key in terms of the infrastructure component. What else are we lacking? We're lacking a framework to get these investments off the ground, but I am very glad to see that Greece is now working on a new framework for wind in particular. It takes far too long to get a permit for an offshore wind park in Greece. I think it's one of the worst in Europe. It can take up to 7 years to get a permit for an offshore wind park. This is a killer for any investor. So we need to bring this down at least to a European average. But it's great that the government is putting forward a proposal. This is really key. This is something that we have focused on in the project. I do want to talk about hydrogen, as this is what I am doing in my day-to-day life. I think Greece has a huge opportunity here. A country and the region has everything going for it in terms of climate, in terms of demand profile. Greece, let's not forget, this is very important. Greece is set to close 12 coal units in 2023. There are 13 in total, and the last one, it was supposed to close in 2028, but now the objective is to close it in 2025. So we're talking about taking away a huge chunk of the electricity mix that's feeding our industry in Greece. About 75% of the electricity mix is coming from coal and lignite today. So what are we going to do? We need renewables and we need baseload. The ambassador talked about hydrocarbons. Hydrogen can also play that role as we continue to ramp up and produce more volumes of hydrogen. Hydrogen is a molecule. It can be transported in pipelines. So we have natural gas today. tomorrow it will be hydrogen. There are relevant, important projects of common European interest that have already been flagged to the European Commission. Some of those that Greece has put forward are focusing on decarbonizing industry that requires high temperature heat. So there's opportunity there. And I want to highlight as well the opportunity in the shipping sector. Greece is a shipping country. Now, you can imagine an ecosystem where you have boats or tourist boats being fueled by renewable hydrogen in the Aegean, an ecosystem in ports where you have hydrogen refueling stations for ships and for lorries. You can have refueling stations that fuel both ships and lorries, multimodal hydrogen refueling stations. You can even imagine tourist boats refueling on islands offshore where renewable hydrogen is being produced directly from offshore wind parks. So the possibilities are really quite remarkable in that sense. And our imagination and innovation here really has no limits in terms of what Greece can do with the land that it has available. If I remember correctly, we have, but by some estimates, Ioannis will correct me, more than 800 islands that are uninhabited. Some of those islands you can build offshore wind parks on them, and they can feed the Greek islands with renewable electricity. They can produce renewable hydrogen onshore for ships, or they can produce hydrogen that can be transported by pipeline to the mainland and used in heavy industries that we need to decarbonize. So really, the possibilities are endless here, as long as we get the framework right, both at national level and at the EU level. The last thing I want to emphasize and highlight is that yesterday, the European Commission announced its work program for 2022. And one of the points that they introduced was that there will be, in 2022, a communication from the Commission on international energy engagement. So this strategy, it will look at how we can move away from fossil fuels, how we can leverage our existing trade relations and make them more Green Deal compliant. So how can we bring on board our partners? How can we bring on board Egypt? How can we bring on board Israel, Turkey even, all regional actors? So I think in Greece and the region, we're going in the right direction with this cooperation agreement with between Greece and Egypt that was referenced with the electricity cables. We need to look at the gas side too as well, and this is the last point I want to make. We have the Union for Mediterranean Gas Platform. There is the EastMed Gas the EastMed Gas Forums. Too many forums potentially that have been created. We need to use these forums and make them Green Deal compliant. I think about the EastMed gas pipeline that's been talked about for many years. Why not look at making this an EastMed hydrogen pipeline? The potential in North Africa to develop renewable hydrogen cheaply is massive. You have low cost renewable electricity production there, lower cost than you can produce in Europe. I think this is something very interesting to look into. And let's not forget, natural gas demand is declining in Europe as of 2030. So I think there's an opportunity for hydrogen there as well. And that will be my last point. I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all for giving us the framework of our discussion. Perhaps Mr. Levoyannis has already answered some of my questions. I would like to begin with Ambassador Andersen. Mr. Ambassador, beginning with you, because you're coming from Norway, and which is part of the Nordic region, which is considered, and in fact, I think it is, a successful regional energy model. So the question is, I think you have answered it many times, but I would like you again for this discussion to answer what are the paradigms of this cooperation that may well fit in the Eastern Mediterranean region. And I would like to add to this, what are the keys to attract investors? Because as we can assume, investors need stability and prospects. And the Eastern Mediterranean is not exactly the Nordic region. It's a volatile region and has no similarities to the Nordic region. So I would like to hear your views on this. Thank you.
Oh, that was a big question. Thank you so much. It was a good question. Two good questions. I'll try to make it short. I think if you look at the stability point of view first, it's connected to the overall question. You need to decouple the market energy and the energy market side from politics. Norway is the EU's is supplying about between 25 and 30% of all the gas to the European Union is coming from Norway. But you rarely hear about Norway's gas export to the EU. Why? Because we're not a political producer. We sell to the EU according to market regulations, and there is no question about it. Nobody suspects Norway of having any political intentions or will turn on and off the gas to the EU for political reasons. And I think that is pivotal in this discussion, that we need to decouple the market mechanism from any kind of political influence. And that's why I emphasized in my introduction, the need for a market mechanism, which is market-based, not a political market mechanism, but a pure market mechanism like a stock exchange. The stock exchange is supply and demand driven, not political. Of course, it's political sensitive in the way that, of course, political questions can interfere on the marketplace, but this buying and selling of energy should be a market-driven process. And if you couple this to what we did in the Nordic countries, I don't know how much you know about Nordic countries and energy production, but let me give you like a very, very quick outline. For the sake of argument, Norway produces about practically 100% of the electricity production in Norway is based on hydropower. In Denmark, it's 60-70% wind power. In Sweden, they have more a balanced mix between nuclear, wind, and hydro. So what happens is that when Denmark is producing, when the wind is blowing strongly like it is now in Denmark, they're producing a lot more wind energy than they can possibly consume. Then what we do in Norway, we turn off the hydropower plants to consume the Danish surplus energy, making sure that the Danish investors in the Danish wind industry get paid for the electricity. If Denmark was a closed market, they would not get paid because they were producing too much. So the price would go into negative, which is actually can do. The other way around, when we have a lot of rain in Norway, we produce a lot of hydro energy, and the snow melting in the spring, we get a lot of water. That means we can produce cheap hydro energy, and Denmark on a non-windy day can then basically take all our surplus. If we don't have a lot of water, if we don't have a lot of wind, we can buy nuclear from Sweden. And that's exactly the point in the Mediterranean region. Because if Greece is following the pattern they're doing now about building a lot of renewable power, they need to offset this power into the wider region, because the Greek market, if you have a good windy autumn day with a lot of sun in Greece, you'll produce more than you need. Then you need to offset it somewhere, preferably in a well-paying market. And if you look at Greece and the neighboring countries, you have some of the Nordic sort of compatibility amongst the markets. What we need now is then, of course, the interconnectors and the market mechanism to stabilize the system. And it's no big trick to it, but you need to decouple. And I think yesterday's deal between Egypt and Greece should be watched very, very carefully, because this might actually be the first major building block in such a regional market. And I'm optimistic, but you need to be able to insulate this interconnected capacity and exchange of electrical power from political influence. And I think the ELIAMEP project in this respect provides a lot of very, very important insights. I don't know if that answered the question, because it was a long rant, but I gave it a try.
You certainly did, Mr. Ambassador. Now, I would like to go to Professor Grigoriadis. How easy could this proposal by Mr. Ambassador be for the East Mediterranean region, the decoupling? Because we don't, the countries of the region do not have the culture, if you allow me, to decouple economy and politics. And this has been certainly the case with the discovery of hydrocarbons. We thought that that could be an opportunity for the countries to cooperate, but it didn't happen. So how could this mechanism that Mr. Ambassador just suggested could be feasible in the EastMed region? Thank you.
Well, I think that cooperation can proceed on a bilateral, trilateral basis, as it is happening already. Of course, the potential would be much bigger if the whole region was involved into this. And I do think that despite the rather pessimistic outlook in Greek-Turkish relations of the last 2 years and the lack of conflict resolution in the Cyprus dispute, we shouldn't give up our hope and efforts in order to make things work in that direction as well. And if all sides, and Turkey in particular, decides to engage in a cooperative manner with other countries in the region, I think that this project can become a very important instrument because it is good business and it's going to promote cooperation and interdependence between all regional actors. And I think there is a very important positive sign in that development. Turkey ratified very recently the Paris Agreement. So for the first time, the Turkish government showed that they do want to be part of this transition and this transformation of global economy by means of shifting from hydrocarbons to renewable energy and protecting climate in multiple ways. Of course, Turkey was also heavily affected by forest fires, floods in the last summer. So the symptoms of the climate crisis were very, very strong. But in addition to that, Turkey also has significant challenges to meet regarding its own energy supply. So relations with Russia are not always good. Like they have very interesting and sort of ups and downs. We had a webinar last week to discuss this very complicated relationship and the ELIAMEP. But I do think that sooner or later Turkey will have to follow that path. And it's important to be ready to engage with Turkey as long as Turkey is willing to play by the rules of the game and by international law. I think that's very important for the region as a whole because the EastMed Gas Forum is a good example for that, and we can envision similar initiatives along the development of renewable energy. And such initiatives should remain open to all countries, and I refer to Turkey in particular here, as long as these countries are willing to accept the normative framework that international cooperation in the region is requiring.
May I add another question, Professor? One of the reasons behind the conflicts that we've seen the last decade regarding of course, the discovery of hydrocarbons have been the bilateral differences you've mentioned, Turkey, and also the lack of willingness, intention of these countries to engage into a dialogue for the delimitation of sea zones. Could this new post-carbon era perhaps move on without the resolution of these differences before? I mean, could a regional cooperation be materialized even without the resolution of these differences or without the delimitation of sea zones among and between neighboring countries? Thank you.
I think it can proceed, although in a less ambitious manner. I don't think that this is going to derail the process. The process will continue because there are ways to consider the existing disputes and still develop the infrastructure necessary. And yesterday's meeting is a good example for that. But on the other hand, of course, we will be missing greater opportunities. So I do think that it is important for the region to use this opportunity as a tool to resolve the disputes that have been outstanding for so long and they have depriving cooperation opportunities from the peoples of the region, and this could be a very positive development for the European Union as a whole as well, because the European Union has also very important stakes in the region as well.
Since you've mentioned the European Union, I would like to move on to Ms. Aleksandra Tomczak. Ms. Tomczak, many of the speakers have already mentioned that the European Green Deal provides an opportunity for the structure of the whole Mediterranean to collaborate, since it shifts, as Professor Grigoriadis already mentioned, the discussion towards a new direction. Firstly, what are the tools provided by the European Commission's Green Deal to facilitate this project? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. As you probably know, what our approach is to mainstream the European Green Deal in other existing policies. So one of the key, I would say one of the key tools for that is to make sure that we have enough financing for the European Green Deal objectives, also in engagement with our partners. That's why, as part of our so-called INDICI, we will have a third of the financing, so financing that we have for development and for cooperation with our partners overseas, that is earmarked for climate projects. This is also much more than we had in the previous financing period. So, as we know, well, money doesn't solve all the problems, but it's a good incentive to really focus the priorities where we think also they should be focused from the point of view of sustainability of these investments. So this is number one. Number two, we also proposed two forms or two levels of cooperation. The first one is green alliances, and the second are green partnerships. We have concluded already a green alliance with Japan. This is a form of cooperation that we envisage for those partners that really demonstrate the same level of ambition as the European Union. And in terms of partnerships, well, this is, let's say, a more entry-level type of cooperation where we define a joint agenda for working on deepening this cooperation on Green Deal matters, whether it's energy, transport, buildings, agriculture, environments, all of these Green Deal aspects. And the first country with which we have concluded such a green partnership was Morocco. Well, we are actually still in the process of finalizing this and waiting for the new government to start working in Morocco in order to be able to finalize this process. So these two provide, I think, quite good blueprints for what we can do with countries that want to go further in their engagement on the European Green Deal. Quite interestingly, you probably know that part of our Fit for 55 package is a proposal to establish a carbon border adjustment mechanism. This proposal has triggered a lot of reactions from our partner countries. Many have been very concerned with what the impacts would be on their industries. But interestingly, all of them are actually, the impacts that we see is that all of them are now thinking how they can also try to avoid negative impacts and therefore accelerate some of the reforms they were planning to do. To give you an example, the dialogue on Green Deal that we have with Ukraine has now demonstrated that Ukraine would like to focus on producing green hydrogen and green steel and green fertilizers that they see good export, for which they see good export potential into the EU. Similar approach is taken by Morocco. We know some other countries in the Mediterranean that have taken a slightly more defensive view, but we hope that with a more intensified dialogue via the Union for the Mediterranean, we can actually explain that this is an opportunity to integrate the region more along the green economy, basically. And for this, I just wanted to say that I fully agree with the need for more interconnection, and taking as an example the Nordic market, which is, of course, one of the, let's say, the the best known examples of how it can work efficiently. But essentially, the higher the share of renewables in our grids, the higher the need for being interconnected. And this will become more and more important as we go forward. We need to have more flexibility. We need to be able to trade energy more efficiently. And that's why I think the declaration that was agreed at the Union for the Mediterranean Ministerial Meeting on Energy is quite helpful. It actually commits all the countries of the Mediterranean to work on joint energy scenarios for the Mediterranean, on assessing the possibility of establishing electricity trading zones in the region. So these are, I think, very good commitments that we need to now, look concretely how we can implement them. And if I may, one last point on a very important issue that was raised on decoupling politics and energy. I think in many countries, energy sector has been used for political means. We have seen that a lot in Eastern Europe. Essentially, one of the key strategies of the Soviet Union, and then also in the associated countries, was to provide cheap energy, and on the back of this develop industries, and therefore it had to be controlled. The prices had to be controlled politically. So we already have an experience within the EU on how to engage with countries which had a very deep engagement of politics in the energy sector, and we know what reforms need to be put in place in order to fix this. We know we need to essentially make sure that prices are set by markets, move away from regulated prices, at the same time protect vulnerable consumers. We know that we need to establish independent regulatory authorities. We know that unbundling is also a system that works well. So we have gone through all these reforms, and we have many member states that have gone through these reforms in an accelerated manner. Now also the energy community, Western Balkans and others are also going through the same reforms. So part of the EU's engagement is not only providing funding, but also technical assistance. And here I think we have a lot to share, because we have countries that have gone through this process, as I said, and have also seen a similar, let's say, degree of political intervention in the energy sector in the past. And I think we can do some good work on this front as well.
Thank you so much. You already answered some of my questions, especially regarding how the European Commission could play a mediating role in possible conflicts or disputes of countries in the EastMed region. But I would like to go back to the financing, because it's crucial. It was your first point, after all. To what extent and how is the European Commission willing to invest, if you allow me, and assist the construction of the necessary infrastructures? And if you allow me, the costly projects of energy storage, which is very important, or projects related to what we call interconnectivity, since these are the keys, the starting points of this new era that the Green Deal brings with it. Thank you.
Yes, as I said, part of a third of our financing is devoted to climate projects, and when we say climate projects, of course, clean energy and interconnectivity are qualifying for this for this mainstreaming of financing for climate. So. Where we are right now is that the delegations in our partner countries are discussing with the governments of those countries on how to best allocate the envelopes that we have foreseen. We're at the beginning of the 7-year budgetary cycle, so these discussions are still going on. There is a dialogue which is essentially trying to find the best possible outcome between what we think should be the priorities for investment and what our partner countries think should be the priorities for investment. But this earmarking is secured. It's a legal obligation. So of course we are ready to finance these projects in all of our partner countries. But important also to note that especially in the energy sector, we really count a lot on financing, financial tools as well. It's one of those sectors where, okay, grants can crowd in other investors. Typically, if you have a grant from the European Union for a project, it's usually much easier to then secure financing from, well, the EIB. And once you have the EIB, it's much easier to secure financing from commercial banks. So we need to think how to best use the resources that we have, because of course they are limited, in order to leverage much more investments also from the private sector in the end. So I would say that it's very much well, not only the European Commission but also the EIB and the broader banking sector, but also based on this new concept that we're developing now, which is called the Team Europe approach, where we also then check which of the member states perhaps want to chip in on the priorities that we want to finance in our partner countries, and that since all of the member states typically have their development banks. We try to always pull together, let's say, a partnership or a consortium of partners that can work jointly on these priorities. Because yes, these are typically very expensive infrastructure projects, and it's better if we can find ways of engaging other donors as well beyond the European Union.
Thank you so much. Now, moving on to Mr. Levoyannis, you have mentioned how hydrogen can contribute to Greece's economy's key sector, which is no other than shipping. I would like us to go back to this issue, because as we have learned from the Financial Times today, the Greek government has officially complained to the European Commission about the proposed inclusion of maritime transport into the bloc's emission trading system. And we think that shipping is one of the most affected sectors at the time being. And we also have a letter of the Prime Minister complaining about it. So how can shipping be helped by hydrogen, and how offshore wind energy can also play a role? Could you please elaborate more what you have mentioned in your introductory remarks? Thank you.
I feel like you just threw a massively huge hot potato at me with regards to shipping and ETS. This is a big hot potato right now. Within the hydrogen sector, and if you look at some of the shipping companies like Maersk from Denmark, or other players in the Nordics, I think to depoliticize this, I think the industry understands that first of all, we're coming to the end of the lifetime of the ships that we have currently in the fleets. So the dilemma now is: do we replace traditional fuels that the ships are running on with LNG, with natural gas, and we lock them into that for the next 30 to 40 years? Now that brings us already up to 2050 and beyond. So the dilemma is we're at a tipping point. We've reached the point where the ships that we have come to the end of their lifetime. We need to decide, are we going to retrofit them? Do we need to invest in new ships? And electricity, using electricity on board big vessels doing large journeys with heavy weight is very, very difficult, nigh impossible. So you need a molecular form of energy to be able to propel the maritime sector. help it to contribute to decarbonizing transport, decarbonizing our planet. And the only molecular form of energy that you have available that can replace traditional fuels is hydrogen. If the hydrogen produced is coming from renewable hydrogen, that is the objective. That means that we're going to need a lot more renewable electricity as well. We're going to need additional renewable electricity, not just to decarbonize our grids, our power sector, our homes. We need it to decarbonize our heavy industries, one of them being shipping. But I understand the government's position on this. But on a more optimistic note, I have seen in the last year that the industry is willing to find compromise solutions and not become entrenched and immovable. So I think there is room to maneuver and to find compromise here. After all, the European Union is a body where we try to find compromises. Alex knows that better than me. So I would be slightly more optimistic on that note. And the Greek shippers themselves, they have a critical role to play here, because Greece is one of the biggest shipping countries in the world, and I think they are starting to understand better the options that they have available. We need to do more awareness raising as an industry on this topic. We need more pilot projects. We need more demonstrators of ships running on hydrogen. So I'm slightly more optimistic.
May I turn back again to Ms. Aleksandra Tomczak? Obviously, I would not like you to comment on the Financial Times report. However, as you have mentioned yourself in your introductory remarks, that the transport sector is a challenging sector regarding the framework of the Green Deal. Is the European Commission flexible enough to discuss goals set for the transport sector, including shipping? And I'm not referring shipping because of Greece, but general, is there room for compromises and negotiations and talks, or perhaps of negotiations on a new framework regarding the rules, especially for the transport sector? Thank you, Ms. Tomczak.
Yeah, there's of course always room for negotiation as long as there is no final adopted text that is agreed by the co-legislators. And what we propose is it's a proposal. It's a basis for discussion for the Parliament and the Council, who have to reach a final decision with the assistant of the Commission as the honest broker in this negotiation. What we have proposed, we think it's a balanced package. Just to remind you, it's 13 legislative proposals, 9 of them existing, 4 of them brand new. Yes, shipping is part of it. The extension of ETS to maritime is part of that, with also a specific initiative on fuel maritime and the decarbonization of fuels in the shipping sector. I think the only thing that we have to bear in mind, and that we always say to the co-legislators, whatever we propose has to result in the emission reductions that we agreed in the European climate law, and that's already binding, 55% by 2030. So, of course, if we lower our ambition in one sector, it means that we have to have a higher ambition in another sector. That is typically what is subject of negotiations between the member states, because, well, some sectors might be more difficult to decarbonize for some member states than for others. So different member states are affected to a different degree by different legislative proposals. And here, our aim, as the Commission's role according to the treaty, is to find a solution that we find is most fair for everyone. But if there is another compromise that reaches the same goals overall and works better in terms of this fairness component, then of course there is always room for negotiation.
Thank you so much. I see a hand raised from you, from Mr. Levoyannis, and I have a question for you. So would you like firstly to comment on what you just heard and then me to give you the question from the audience?
Sure. So I just wanted to add something to this discussion around the shipping sector, and Alex was talking about the role of funding and the negotiations. It's important to re-emphasize this point that the European Union is providing incentives for the shipping industry to decarbonize their fleets. They're setting targets for, demand side targets for the use of renewable hydrogen in fleets through their Fuel EU Maritime proposal. This is something that's going to be discussed between co-legislators. This is a process that the industry, the governments, they all need to engage in. So there are funds available. We're not just telling them that you have to scrap what you're doing now and you're not going to have any incentives or means to do it. The European Union is setting a framework and providing funds to help the industry transition. And the last point I want to make is that everyone's talking about energy prices and fuel prices right now. So what are we using in the ships? We're using fuel that is very expensive. And if we go back to an earlier point that I was talking about, is how do you make the region more self-sufficient in terms of the energy that it's producing, the renewable energy that's producing, the renewable electricity, the renewable hydrogen. If we're producing renewable hydrogen in Greece and the region, if we create a hub in the Mediterranean for the transport of hydrogen between countries, you have hydrogen available for your ships. It's going to be much cheaper when it's produced locally than it is if we're using fuels that we're transporting from the other side of the world to Greece to power our ships. So I think we need to emphasize this point and talk about how important it is that we produce these fuels locally.
We have a question from the audience, from Mr. Lambros Sirmos, if I'm pronouncing the surname correct. He says that Mr. Levoyannis, Constantine, spoke earlier about difficulty in building wind solar farms. What is this down to? Strict government regulation, corruption, local resistance, or something else? And what could be the solution? I think this question could go to everyone. Thank you.
I can take a first crack at that. So I think everyone will agree that red tape, bureaucracy is a systemic problem in Greece, not just in the energy sector. I think in some cases it's improved, but for wind projects specifically, I mentioned earlier, it's just 7 years and more is just far too long to get a permit. So, what's the solution? Hopefully the solution is this legislation on wind energy that's going through the parliament in Greece, that will be put to parliament, and they will I think the government right now understands, and everyone in Greece understands, that we need investment. We need to attract investment. So you need a framework that is conducive to business coming in. I think the other thing that I'll mention, and I know Ioannis can build on this, so Ioannis, I give you a nice pass, the role of public opposition to renewable projects in Greece is quite astounding. If you think about how the green movement in Greece act in general, it's a paradox compared to what we see in Brussels, in Central Europe. The green groups acting against the build-up of renewable projects, whether they be solar, but it's more so the case in wind. Local owners are concerned. The tourist industry is concerned about seeing wind parks offshore and how that's going to affect a tourist's ability to enjoy the sunset. So these kinds of questions are issues on the table. So I know the wind industry is talking about having a certain amount of distance of offshore wind parks from the shore. That could be some form of solution, something that governments and stakeholders discuss. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Mr. Levoyannis. Now I would like to address to Mr. Ambassador. I think the question from our audience was one of the questions I would have asked, especially to Mr. Amyras, but he's not here with us. I would like to ask you, how could the state or even the civil society convince these people who are skeptical, cautious, and even reject and oppose and protest against these projects? And what kind of initiatives could be taken in this direction? Perhaps this public debate is one of these. Thank you.
Well, there is a nice answer to that and a not so nice answer to that. I'll start with a not so nice answer to that. The competition in offshore wind energy is fierce. If Greece is not offering a competitive law, which is giving market opportunities which will attract investors, they will go somewhere else. It's that simple. There are ample amounts of opportunity in Portugal, Spain, through Scotland, United Kingdom, etc., etc. So it's not like we're running out of coast or running out of wind elsewhere in Europe. So it's kind of simple in a way. If the Greek law and the Greek environment for licenses is not attractive enough, they will go somewhere else. That's the not so nice answer. Coming to sort of popular resistance to energy and environmental groups, I think the point made was very apt. I'm struggling to understand these green groups that calling themselves green in Greece, being against wind farms, basically saying that yes, we would like to continue using lignite and heavy fuel oil to heat to produce electricity, but we would not like a wind farm. I think they should then strike green in their logo, because that is it's a bit incomprehensible. But if we take real concerns from population, for instance, on an island like we see on Tinos and some other islands, they feel it's unfair that they will have to have all the windmills, whereas other parts of the country are not having windmills. I think you can solve a lot of this through dialogue, information, and having companies that are willing to build on licenses, to come in and do public information telling what this is, what it is not, what is the upside for the local community, what's the downside, and be honest about it. I think that's the only way about it, because the worst thing in these kind of instances, I'm talking of experience from my country, is where you ignore the local communities, and we have a license from the state, we don't have to deal with the local communities, and I think that's the first mistake the companies will do in coming into such areas. You'll have to discuss, debate, inform local communities, because there is a lot of misinformation out there, and there's a lot of resistance which are based on assumptions rather than facts. So I think a lot can be done better than we have seen both in my countries and in other countries where we also have popular resistance. But at the end of the day, some of the resistance will have to be dubbed as resistance which will be there, because if somebody is calling themselves green and want to keep a lignite plant and not have a windmill, I think it's like anti-vaxxers. It's public information can go this far, but if people just don't want to be informed, you can hardly force them. So at some point you need the ability also to cut through and say, okay, the license is valid, the license is there, they are entitled to build. But there was also heavy responsibility on the companies to provide information, provide good factual information, both on the positives and the negatives of a license, being it wind farms or anything else. Thanks.
That was a very clear answer. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I would like to go now again to Professor Grigoriadis and whether he can share his views on this issue. And perhaps I could add a question regarding the Energy Gas Forum, which has been one of the initiatives in this region. Is it fair, Professor, for someone to assume that we could already be talking about the end of the Energy Gas Forum and its transition to green energy forum? We know that the first one operates with some exclusions. Is it feasible for the new initiative to become more inclusive, and under which preconditions? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me begin by sharing my views on the topic already discussed. I would agree with what the ambassador said about the paradox in this position of many civil society activists in Greece. But I would also like to highlight that there can be some real issues. So protecting the landscape, protecting biodiversity, these are factors that need to be considered in all investments, including the development of offshore or onshore wind power farms. But this doesn't mean that the power projects cannot be developed. Like, there are ways to compromise and protect the natural heritage and the cultural heritage of the country and the islands or the mainlands or the mountains, while remaining loyal to the strategic goal of decarbonizing the country, which is the real issue. Like, the islands will be desertified in a few decades because of climate change. So this is important to consider, that we may have some difficult decisions to make in order to protect what is the most important, which is our planet and our country as well. To get back to your other question, I think it's already been stated very aptly by the previous speakers that natural gas will be the fuel of the transition age. So it's not that we're going to give up natural gas very soon. So the EastMed Gas Forum has still a case, and cooperation can continue in that respect. But this doesn't mean that we miss the strategic goal of decarbonization. Within a few decades, we have to be fully reliant on renewable energy to save our countries and our planet as well. So in that respect, as you said, Turkey has been absent from the EastMed Gas Forum. This has been a function of the disputes in the region. You know that Turkey refused to recognize the Republic of Cyprus. It's not to say that the countries refused to invite Turkey. Turkey doesn't want to join an organization whereby the Republic of Cyprus is a member because of its position not to recognize the Republic of Cyprus. This is what I tried to explain before as the old disputes strangling our future in that respect. So hopefully this new initiative that's going to be developed and trying to bring all the countries together in order to pursue the common goal of decarbonization, green energy transition, and climate protection in the Eastern Mediterranean. This will provide a framework whereby cooperation of all countries, including Turkey, will become possible. And hopefully this will also set a path for the resolution of the outstanding disputes in the region.
We certainly hope so. Now, I think we are coming to a close, so I would like again to begin with His Excellency, Mr. Ambassador Andersen, on his concluding remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think I'll be very, very short, and thank you all for a very interesting discussion and exchange of views. We are now entering a very, very interesting period in Greece and in the region regarding energy transition and energy interconnectivity, and we're off to a good start. And yes, I agree that the political sides of the questions brought up regarding Turkey and these issues are a challenge. But then on the other hand, we see the developments with Egypt but also neighboring countries to the north, Albania, Northern Macedonia, Italy, for that matter. So I think I prefer to see the glass as half full rather than half empty at this point. And Greece is offering a host of opportunities as an energy platform for the future. And I really, really hope that the good prospects now being presented will materialize in the near future. So I remain optimistic. Thank you very much.
Yes, well, we should remain optimistic, and we have forgot to mention, I mean, you did, certainly did, the expansion and the cooperation with other regions in the neighborhood, like the Western Balkans. Now, moving on to Ms. Aleksandra Tomczak for her concluding remark.
Yeah, thank you, and I wanted to highlight one subject in my concluding remarks that we didn't talk too much about, but which is very important, and that's the coal exit in Greece. That is probably has one of the most ambitious timelines we have seen in Europe. We only have, 2 more years to retire coal-fired power plants that today provide, I think, roughly 40% of electricity in Greece. This is huge. Nevertheless, the plans are there. I understand that there will be some switch to natural gas, and this transitional role of the natural gas has been highlighted. But I would also, in these concluding remarks, caution against falling into the trap of a one-to-one switch from coal to gas. This is probably not the best idea given what is happening in the energy markets right now, which shows us that volatile prices of fossil fuels might be here to stay a little bit longer, given how also unpredictable Asia has become when it comes to the consumption of fuels such as gas, because they are also going through a coal exit. So relying entirely on gas is definitely not a good strategy. And as was mentioned many times by previous speakers, Greece has ideal geographic conditions, and I can tell it also in comparison to Poland, where I come from, where we clearly don't have as much coastline and as much sun exposure as Greece has. These really good natural conditions should be exploited as much as possible. Permitting is clearly a challenge. We will be issuing a guidance on this in the coming year, because we see this being a problem in other member states. It takes more or less 4 years to permit a wind park and only 9 months to build. So we need to, if we want to reach our targets, generally speaking, in Europe, we need to do things much faster. So, and also looking into the broader region, again, building on the good basis of the last 2 meetings of the Union for the Mediterranean, the Energy Council, the energy ministers, the climate and environment ministers, that will be important. And hopefully we can use the forthcoming COP27 presidency, which is most likely going to be in Egypt, as another opportunity to emphasize how important integrating the region in terms of infrastructure and integrating the region with the European economy, how important that will be for future growth and jobs, and therefore the stability of the region. So thanks for that discussion. That was very interesting.
We thank you, Ms. Tomczak. Now going back to Professor Ioannis Grigoriadis for his concluding remark. Thank you.
I would like to stress the significance of this project and this transition for the region and for the European Union. The Mediterranean has been underperforming as a region and as a potential opportunity for European Union. And I do think that, as already has been highlighted, there's plenty of sun, there's plenty of wind, there's unrealized potential in connectivity from north to south, but also along the coastlines due to the overabundance of problems in the region. So in that respect, it's a great historic opportunity for the region to come closer and develop synergies and collaboration that can help bring a new era in the bilateral relations of all the countries involved, but also for the Mediterranean as a whole.
We also hope so. Professor Grigoriadis, now last but not least, to Mr. Levoyannis for his concluding remark. Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, more or less everything has been said for me by the previous speakers. I think I would also, if I may, I would re-emphasize what Professor Grigoriadis was saying, in that this project, Winds of Change, is, forgive the pun, it really is a breath of fresh air for Greece and the region. I remember being in Greece before we went into lockdown, before COVID came into our lives, and it was at an energy conference that was very much dominated on the role of natural gas in the energy transition. And coming from a place like Brussels, it was it felt like I was in the wrong room. Not to say that natural gas doesn't have a role to play. I think Ms. Tomczak explained that very clearly in her concluding remarks, in terms of what is the role of gas and what we need to be wary of, especially in the times we're living now, and what's going on in Asian markets. There's a lot of demand in Asia that's driving up the prices in Europe. So this project really is a breath of fresh air. We're finally talking and discussing these topics openly, and I think that is commendable. And thank you very much for the opportunity to discuss here. It's been very, very interesting, and I hope it will continue.
We certainly hope that it will continue, and on this opportunity, I would like to wish you all good success for the completion of the project Wind of Change of ELIAMEP, and I would like to thank you and the audience for this interesting discussion. Thank you.